For the next 90 minutes, we're going to be talking about female sexuality. It's a wide-ranging and I think universally important subject that we'll attempt to cover with frank and hopefully useful discussion. My guests are a group of women whose professional work has collectively gone far toward revolutionizing what's known and what's expected by and from women in the often misunderstood and, on television at least, infrequently explored area of sex and sexuality. During the course of this program, we'll be talking about intercourse, masturbation, orgasm, and other topics covered by an extraordinary nationwide survey of female sexuality called the Hite Report. Don't get hung up, don't get turned on, and don't get turned off by the use of those words. They're just words. Get past the shock value, and you'll probably learn something useful about sexuality. And maybe, just maybe, you'll even learn something important about yourself and the people you love. First, we'll talk to Shere Hite, the author of the controversial report. Her book has been on the bestseller list now for over 15 weeks, and it's won widespread acclaim as one of the most important and certainly most revolutionary sex surveys ever done. We'll then be joined by two experts in this field, Drs. Mary Calderone and Leah Schaefer, both of them here to discuss Shere's findings. This book started about 5 years ago when Shere Hite began distributing questionnaires to women throughout the country. Ranging in age from 14 all the way to 78, the women were asked to describe their most private feelings about their sex lives. The answers, which make up almost 90% of the book, were surprisingly candid. One review of the Hite Report said, quote, "Never before have so many women responded so directly and with such honest information." Ladies and gentlemen in our studio audience, please join me in welcoming our special guest this evening, Ms. Shere Hite. Your book has really caused a tremendous stir, and I just wonder if we could start by you kind of laying out the goals that you had before you started the project. What did you want to accomplish with it?
Well, I thought that women had never had a chance to really speak out on how they felt about sex, and many of the books that I read were written from a very clinical male point of view, describing what a woman should feel during intercourse, etc. And I thought it's about time that women had a chance to say for themselves how they felt. And I thought it would be important that it become a topic of public discussion, not something that each individual wondered alone whether or not they were different or somehow how they fit in.
What, I know, it's a big book and you spent 5 years writing it. If I asked you to summarize your conclusions in 1 minute, I hope you wouldn't be insulted, but why don't you try?
Well, I know we'll have a lot of chance to talk about it later. One of the most important conclusions is that intercourse doesn't lead to orgasm automatically for most women. I think this has been one of the most oppressive notions that we've had for a long time, and something that's caused women to wonder if they were strange or different or exactly what they should do about the fact that they didn't orgasm during intercourse.
In the Masters and Johnson sex survey and others that I've read, orgasm is a kind of traditional part of intercourse, and Masters and Johnson went to great lengths to describe exactly how women achieved orgasm through intercourse. Your study contradicts that. I want you to talk a little bit more about that, Shere. I know that it'll be the basis of a lot of discussion this evening, but why don't we start by getting some of your...
Well, Masters and Johnson made a tremendous step forward in that they studied and showed clinically for the first time that all orgasms are caused by clitoral stimulation, and we really have them to thank for that. However, and they described how it's done. The thrusting of the penis causes the vaginal lips to move, which causes the skin that's connected to the clitoris to move, which causes the glands to move over the clitoris, which supposedly gives you orgasm. But that doesn't work for most women, and I called it, unkindly, a Rube Goldberg model. There's just too many variables involved.
It's funny when you describe it that way, it kind of sounds like the knee bone connected to the shin bone.
That's right.
What percentage of women that you interviewed achieved orgasm through intercourse? Oh, the women that replied to your questionnaire.
Well, about 30% achieved
Only
orgasm.
30%.
during intercourse, from intercourse itself, not, using any additional manual stimulation. And many of those described exactly how they did it. And usually they would be very assertive in getting enough clitoral stimulation by connecting with the man's pubic bone. In some cases, intercourse didn't really mean going in and out. Intercourse meant lying together very closely, pressing together in a sort of rocking motion. A lot of women had worked out individual ways that worked for them, but it almost always involved some kind of clitoral friction.
What about the total percentage of the women that you interviewed? What percentage of them could achieve orgasm either by intercourse or masturbation?
Well, 82% of the women in the study masturbated, whether frequently or infrequently, and 96% of them to orgasm every time.
Okay, so you found that masturbation was a far more efficient way to achieve orgasm for most women than an intercourse. Do you think that...
well, that's been shown in other studies, too.
Is masturbation, then, a cornerstone of female sexuality?
That's right. It's been understood more and more by more and more people in the field that masturbation is the key to understanding female orgasm, because women orgasm so easily during masturbation. And it's strange why we haven't seen fit to look at this and to see how women masturbate and to integrate this into what we call sex. Because if this is how women orgasm, why are we so averse to acknowledging that?
Is it, Shere, in your opinion, possible that generations of women have been spending tremendous time and energy and resources to go to psychotherapy because they haven't been achieving orgasm, when in fact they haven't been achieving orgasm just because they don't know the proper technique, or they're afraid to tell their mate the proper technique to stimulate the clitoris?
Yeah, well, women have been treated as second class in sex. The whole definition of sex has made women second class. It's told them that they should adjust to a certain pattern of sex which didn't take their needs into account. And women have been oppressed in this way for quite a long time.
That sounds political. Is politics part of your findings?
Well, everything is political after all, sure. And in the sense that the way we've defined sex for the last 3,000 years has not given the woman a chance to have orgasm for the most part, sure, that's political.
Okay, there's another song that says we've only just begun. So why don't we take a break right now for a commercial message. We'll be back in about 2 minutes to continue it. I think, at least, is a useful and intriguing discussion with Shere Hite, author of the Hite Report. We'll be right back, right after this. Shere Hite and I have been joined by two of the top authorities in the field of sexual research and female sexuality. Mary Calderone has been called the First Lady of Sex Education. She first gained national recognition after becoming medical director of the Planned Parenthood Federation, in 1953. A decade later, she founded the Sex Information and Education Council of the United States, SIECUS, and since then, she's been its executive director and president. Dr. Leah Schaefer, sitting next to Dr. Calderone, has been a practicing psychotherapist in New York City for 20 years. She's on the executive board of the Society for the Scientific Study of Sex and is the author of the book Women and Sex. Doctors, welcome. Dr. Calderone, let me ask you first, a kind of general question. What do you think of the Hite Report?
It's great.
Why?
It gave all sorts of women tremendous scope to say what's been in their hearts bottled up for centuries.
Tell me more about that. Why has it been so repressed, and what was the revolutionary aspect of what they had to say?
Well, for the first time, they, in a sense, were invited to think about something that they put out of their minds. If they're unhappy, or if they're unsuccessful, or if they can't orgasm, and they fake it for their husbands, that, in essence, the society says you're a failure. The husband says you're a failure. And all of a sudden came this opportunity to spend any unlimited amount of time saying the things that they felt. And believe me, it's pretty devastating what women feel. Leah Schaefer is a psychotherapist and sex counselor. I'm not. And so she can tell you more about how devastating it is.
I think that the book gives you different ways of looking at things, and I think that it frees people of a tremendous burden. It frees people of thinking that, for instance, in the findings in the book, which have to do with the fact that 70% of the women do not experience orgasm during intercourse. Now, this does not mean that the women don't enjoy intercourse. It just means that they don't orgasm during intercourse and that they have other ways of experiencing orgasm. Now, the fact that of this finding frees a lot of women who had always felt that there was something wrong with them, that if they didn't experience sex and orgasm in the way that was considered to be the absolute perfect and best, they felt like there was something wrong with them, which put a tremendous burden on the women. Put a tremendous burden on the men, too, that they all felt like they had to accomplish something. I think the book also frees women to be responsible for their own sexual pleasure, that it gives them the opportunity to think about self-stimulation as a way of learning about themselves, and there really is no better way for women, or men for that matter, to learn about their own bodies and their own feelings as to learn about their own bodies and their own feelings. And women historically have been discouraged from doing for themselves, from taking care of themselves, even for a long time from making their own money, from making their own sex pleasure, for that matter. And I think, in a way, I think that sometimes people tend to take that incorrectly when they think that if women are encouraged to stimulate themselves, that it means that they won't want to have sexual relations with men or whatever partners they choose. And that isn't true. All it does is it's another way of experiencing themselves, and it's also a way of finding out about themselves.
If masturbation is so much more efficient and effective way to achieve orgasm than intercourse, it seems to me that the way to go from here is to incorporate that into the sex act, to maybe increase communication between partners. What I'm afraid of is that when we say that masturbation is so much a better way, at least in terms of time spent and energy expended.
Geraldo, wait a minute.
But
Okay,
yeah, it also
that's
doesn't
good.
mean by themselves, because people, it is terminology. We tend to think, when we say masturbation, for one thing, we always think of alone.
Right.
And it's an act which tends to be isolated. I mean, people don't like to talk about it, and people like
That's
to...
because it gives you pimples and warts. Everyone
Well,
knows.
right, yeah, but even all of those old myths have a reason for, why they came about. And the fact is that people can learn that it's not something they need to be ashamed of, and it's something they can share with each other. And as they learn to communicate better about all of their feelings, they will learn to communicate better about this too.
But it's very important to realize that all the women in Master's study did orgasm faster with masturbation, but they preferred orgasm with coitus. That's very significant. To them it was more meaningful, more exciting, and as a matter of fact, if the vagina isn't full, you don't get as strong an orgasm.
Well, I would like to make a point on that. And of course, Seymour Fisher did a long study, trying to get the subjective feelings of women during orgasm, as I did. He and I came up with very similar results. And I'm not sure exactly how Masters and Johnson did control that group, or exactly what their questions were, because it wasn't given in the book. But Fisher and I both asked the question, would you prefer to have orgasm with a penis or without a penis? And the questions that came back, I mean, you don't just have black and white, it's better one way or the other, but you have adjectives. And the adjectives involve words like more exciting, more whole body, more fulfilling, more ecstatic, more localized. In other words, you come up with some women liking it better one way, some the other. But in a sense, what they were saying was the same thing, that it was more localized and perhaps more sharp without a penis, but with a penis, some women felt that it was a more total body experience, that it was more... So it's sort of the glass half full, the glass half empty, and it depends on your feelings for your partner, probably, which feels...
But I don't know, I object to a discussion of what's better and what's more and what's faster and what feels this and what feels that, because I think it does that it narrows everybody's opportunities to accept their own experience, whatever it happens to be.
But I think it's tremendously important for men to realize and accept women as sexual people. Not as sexual people to be scared of, to freeze up because they can have 10 orgasms, some of them, not all of them. But as the people who are sharing this tremendous thing with them. And I think the next thing is, I'd like to see men freer. I'm glad Shere is doing a report, and I hope the men will be as free in that report as the women are, because this is the beginning of good dialogue.
What has historically happened when a woman surrendered herself to a psychotherapist and said, help me, I can't orgasm during intercourse?
Depends on the psychotherapist. There are some psychotherapists who would follow what was the traditional Freudian view, which said that if you didn't orgasm during intercourse, then you weren't really a mature person. And that the so-called clitoral orgasm, which is a terrible differentiation, was considered to be an immature kind of an orgasm, and a vaginal orgasm was considered to be a mature orgasm. So what it did do was it caused a lot of women to feel terrible about themselves, and it caused a lot of men to feel very inadequate to bring some woman to an experience which was going to be impossible for both of them. And then, unfortunately, many therapists and psychoanalysts followed that course so for many, many years, and there were only a very few who ever deviated from that road. But I think that's changing a great deal today.
Okay, let's talk about those changes. Let's talk about where our sexual consciousness is at in '77, and talk about where it's going right after this commercial message. Stay with us, please.